More than 10,000 people saw the same thing. On the same night. In the same sky. And the governor of the state stood in front of cameras the next day and laughed. Years later, he admitted he had seen it too. And that he had no explanation. This is the story of March 13, 1997. The night the sky over Arizona was never the same again. This is the cold signal. To understand what happened on the night of March 13, 1997, you need to understand where it happened. Arizona is a state of vast open spaces. Desert, mountain ranges, and sky that goes on forever. Cities like Phoenix and Tucson sit in broad valleys surrounded by mountains on all sides. The air is dry and clear. On a good night, the stars are close enough to touch. It is not a place where things go unnoticed. If something appears in the sky over Arizona, people see it. And on the night of March 13, 1997, something appeared. Something that thousands of people described in the same way. Something that moved in silence. Something that was enormous. The first reports came from Nevada. At approximately 7:15 in the evening, witnesses in the city of Henderson, just outside Las Vegas, reported a large object moving slowly through the sky toward the south. They described it as a V-shape. A series of lights arranged in a triangular formation, moving in complete silence. The object was not a plane. Planes make noise. Planes have blinking navigation lights. Planes do not block out the stars as they pass overhead. This blocked out the stars. Witnesses said it passed directly over their heads and the lights on its edges illuminated a solid mass beneath. Not separate aircraft flying in formation. A single object. Solid. Enormous. Moving with a slow, deliberate, almost impossible calm. From Henderson, the reports moved south. Into Arizona. At approximately 8:15 in the evening, witnesses in Prescott, a city in central Arizona, reported the same object. The same V-shape. The same silence. Moving slowly toward the south at a speed they estimated at no more than 30 miles per hour. 30 miles per hour. A commercial aircraft at cruising altitude travels at approximately 570 miles per hour. Whatever this was, it was in no hurry. And it was low. Witnesses in Prescott said it passed directly over the city at an altitude they estimated between 1,000 and 2,000 feet. Close enough to see the individual lights on its structure. Close enough to see that the lights were not positioned on separate aircraft. They were fixed points on something that moved as a single unit. A man named Tim Lay was in his yard in North Phoenix with his wife and son when he saw it coming from the north. He described watching it for nearly 20 minutes as it approached slowly from the mountains. He said it appeared to be a mile wide. That it passed directly overhead. That he could see the outline of the craft against the night sky, blocking the stars behind it. He said the silence was the most disturbing part. Something that large, making no sound at all. At approximately 8:30 in the evening, the object was over the Phoenix metropolitan area. Phoenix is a city of more than 1 million people. Spread across a wide desert valley, with clear sightlines in every direction. On the night of March 13, thousands of people were outside. Some were driving. Some were in their yards. Some had been watching the object approach for minutes. A retired airline pilot named Trig Johnston was flying a private Cessna near Luke Air Force Base on the western outskirts of Phoenix when he saw the formation. He said immediately that it was not any aircraft he had ever seen. He said it was not a formation of aircraft. He said the lights were attached to a single structure that was, his word, gigantic. A former police officer named Frank Costigan described watching it pass overhead from his front yard. He said it was so large that he had to turn his head to follow it from one end to the other. That it made no sound. That it moved with a kind of purposeful slowness that felt almost deliberate. As if it wanted to be seen. Another witness, a physician named Dr. Bradley Evans, was with his wife on a hiking trail west of Phoenix. They watched the object for several minutes. He later said that as a scientist, as a doctor, he had spent his entire career looking for rational explanations for things. And that for the first time in his life, he could not find one. Whatever he saw, defied everything he knew. The object continued south. Witnesses in Tucson, 112 miles south of Phoenix, reported seeing the same V-shaped formation later that evening. From Henderson, Nevada, to Tucson, Arizona, the object traveled approximately 300 miles. In complete silence. At a speed that no conventional aircraft would bother to maintain. Now we need to make something very clear. Because this is where most accounts of the Phoenix Lights case become confused. And that confusion has been used deliberately to muddy the waters. On the night of March 13, 1997, there were two separate events. The first event was the slow-moving V-shaped craft that traveled from Nevada through Arizona between approximately 7:15 and 9:30 in the evening. Thousands of witnesses reported this object over a period of more than 2 hours across 300 miles. The second event occurred at approximately 10 o'clock in the evening. A series of lights appeared in the sky southwest of Phoenix. 8 to 10 bright yellowish-orange orbs arranged in an arc formation, stationary or nearly stationary, hovering over the Estrella Mountains near the Gila River Indian Community. These lights remained visible for several minutes before disappearing one by one. This second event was filmed by multiple witnesses. The footage was broadcast on television news the following days and became the iconic visual associated with the Phoenix Lights case. And it is this second event that the government chose to explain, while quietly ignoring the first. Before we talk about the government's explanation, we need to talk about one witness who stands apart from the others. Her name is Dr. Lynn Kitty-Eye. In March of 1997, Dr. Kitty-Eye was a physician living in Paradise Valley, a suburb of Phoenix. She had no particular interest in unidentified aerial phenomena. She was a respected medical professional with a logical, evidence-based approach to the world. But beginning in early 1995, 2 years before the mass sighting of March 13, she had been documenting strange lights appearing near her home. Amber-colored orbs that appeared in formations, hovered, and disappeared. She had been filming them with a high-quality video camera and photographing them with a 35mm camera. She had told almost no one. She was a doctor. She had a reputation. She was rational enough to know what saying these things out loud could do to a career. But she kept filming. On the night of March 13, 1997, the lights appeared again. Larger than before. Closer. She filmed them again from her balcony. What she captured that night matched, in extraordinary detail, what thousands of other people across the Phoenix metropolitan area were simultaneously reporting from the ground below. Dr. Kitty I spent years afterward compiling testimonies, footage, and scientific analysis of what happened that night. She wrote a book. She produced a documentary. She became the most thorough civilian researcher of the Phoenix Lights case. And she never found an explanation that satisfied her. Decades later, she still has not. The lights over Phoenix attracted attention that spread nationally in the days that followed. Television stations in Arizona began running stories. The footage from multiple cameras, showing the arc of lights over the Estrella Mountains, was broadcast across the country. The phone lines of Luke Air Force Base, the major military installation on the western edge of Phoenix, were overwhelmed with calls. Luke Air Force Base said nothing unusual had occurred that night. The city of Phoenix was flooded with calls to police and emergency services. Arizona Governor Fife Symington said nothing. For weeks, the governor of the state with the largest mass UFO sighting in American history said nothing. And then he called a press conference. The date was June 19, 1997. 3 months after the event. Reporters and witnesses gathered expecting answers. Expecting the governor of Arizona to take seriously what tens of thousands of his constituents had reported seeing. Instead, Governor Symington walked to the podium and announced that his office had identified the culprit. And then his chief of staff walked out from behind a curtain. Dressed in an alien costume. Symington laughed. The room laughed. It was treated as a joke. As a punchline. The governor of Arizona had just mocked more than 10,000 witnesses. Pilots. Police officers. Doctors. Retired military personnel. Families. Children. People who had seen something with their own eyes and did not know what it was. He had mocked every one of them. And the national media, largely went along with it. The Phoenix Lights became a late-night talk show joke. And the investigation, effectively stopped. Except that it didn't stop. Not for everyone. Because in the months and years that followed, researchers and journalists began looking more carefully at what the government had actually claimed. The official explanation for the second event, the arc of lights seen at approximately 10 o'clock in the evening, was provided by the United States Air Force several months after the sighting. The lights, said the Air Force, were LUU-2B/B illumination flares. Specifically, they were flares dropped by a group of A-10 Thunderbolt aircraft from the 104th Fighter Wing of the Maryland Air National Guard. The aircraft were conducting a training exercise at the Barry M. Goldwater Air Force Range, southwest of Phoenix. The flares were dropped at high altitude and drifted slowly downward, creating the appearance of stationary lights hovering over the mountains. It was, said the Air Force, a completely mundane military exercise. Nothing unusual. Nothing to see. The explanation was accepted by many media outlets without further scrutiny. But researchers who examined the timeline and geography of that night found problems. Significant problems. The first problem is the timeline. The flare explanation accounts for the lights seen at 10 o'clock in the evening. It does not account for anything seen before 9:30. The slow-moving V-shaped craft that traveled from Nevada through Arizona over a period of more than 2 hours, witnessed by thousands of people in multiple cities, was never addressed by the Air Force's explanation. The flares were dropped southwest of Phoenix near the Estrella Mountains. The witnesses who saw the triangular craft reported it moving from the northwest, from the direction of Nevada, slowly south through Prescott, Wickenburg, and Phoenix, eventually passing over the city itself. These are different events. Different locations. Different times. Different descriptions. The Air Force explained one of them, and pretended the other had not happened. The second problem is geometry. The Barry M. Goldwater Range, where the flares were supposedly dropped, is approximately 65 miles southwest of downtown Phoenix. The witnesses who filmed and photographed the lights over Phoenix were standing in the northern and central parts of the metropolitan area, looking southwest. At that distance, 65 miles, military flares at high altitude would appear as small, dim points of light on the horizon. Not as large, bright, amber-colored orbs filling a significant portion of the sky. Multiple witnesses who filmed the event noted that the lights appeared close. Not on the distant horizon. Not faint and small. Close. Bright. Defined. A physics professor at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, one of the most respected aviation universities in the United States, analyzed the footage and the proposed flare explanation. He concluded that for military flares dropped at the Goldwater Range to appear as large and bright as they did in the Phoenix footage, they would have had to be dropped at an altitude so extreme that it was inconsistent with standard A-10 training procedures. The numbers did not work. The third problem is the Estrella Mountains. One of the most striking aspects of the footage from the 10 o'clock event is the way the lights disappear. They do not fade gradually, as flares falling toward the ground would fade. They go out. One by one. In sequence. Cleanly. As if switched off. Researchers who analyzed the footage and compared it to topographical maps of the area made an observation: the lights appear to disappear precisely at the point where the ridgeline of the Estrella Mountains would have blocked the view of an object behind the mountains. In other words, the lights may not have gone out at all. They may have moved behind the mountains. Which means they may have been closer to Phoenix than the official explanation suggested. And moving. Not stationary flares drifting downward on the wind. Something that moved in a deliberate direction and disappeared behind a mountain range. The fourth problem is the witnesses themselves. Among those who reported seeing the events of March 13, 1997, were people with professional training in identifying aircraft and distinguishing them from other phenomena. Former military pilots. Commercial airline pilots. Air traffic controllers. Law enforcement officers trained in observation and reporting. These were not people who could easily confuse military flares with something they could not identify. Multiple former military pilots, speaking in interviews in the years following the event, said explicitly that what they saw was not consistent with any aircraft they had ever encountered in their careers. Not in appearance. Not in behavior. Not in silence. An Air Force veteran named Bill Grainer was driving a cement truck near Luke Air Force Base on the night of March 13. He said he watched the triangular craft hover near the base for what felt like several minutes. He said 2 military jets scrambled from the base and flew toward the object. And he said the object accelerated and disappeared in a fraction of a second. Luke Air Force Base denied that any aircraft were scrambled that night. Bill Grainer stuck to his account. And he was not alone. Other witnesses in the area near Luke reported seeing military jets in the vicinity of the craft. The base said nothing happened. But something happened that night near Luke Air Force Base. And whatever it was, the United States Air Force has never fully accounted for it. Now we come to the most extraordinary part of this story. The man who stood at a podium in June of 1997 and mocked 10,000 witnesses in front of cameras. Fife Symington had been the governor of Arizona since 1991. A former Air Force officer himself. A man who understood aviation. A man who had the authority to demand answers from the military and from federal agencies operating in his state. And he chose to hold a joke press conference. But in 2007, 10 years after the event, Fife Symington gave an interview to CNN. And what he said was not a joke. Symington told the CNN interviewer that on the night of March 13, 1997, he had personally seen the lights. He said he had seen the V-shaped formation moving over Phoenix. He said it was unlike anything he had ever seen in his years in the Air Force. He said, and these were his words, that it was enormous, otherworldly, and something he could not explain. He said he had held the press conference with the alien costume because at the time, he did not know what else to do. He did not want to cause panic. He did not want to be the governor of Arizona who stood in front of cameras and said he had no explanation for what tens of thousands of people had seen in the sky. So he laughed instead. But it had always been real. He had always known it was real. And for 10 years, he had kept that to himself. In interviews after his 2007 revelation, Symington went further. He said he believed the government knew more than it was saying. He said he had contacted federal authorities in the period after the sighting and had received responses that were unsatisfying, vague, deflective. He said that he, the governor of a state where one of the largest mass UFO sightings in American history had just occurred, could not get a straight answer from the United States government about what had been in his state's sky. A former Air Force officer, the governor of Arizona, could not get an answer. What does that tell us? It tells us one of two things. Either the government genuinely did not know what appeared in the sky over Arizona on the night of March 13, 1997, which is itself a disturbing conclusion. Or the government knew, and chose not to tell the governor of the affected state. Both possibilities are troubling in different ways. If the most powerful military apparatus in the history of human civilization cannot identify what flew over one of its own cities for more than 2 hours, what does that mean for the safety of the people living under that sky? And if the government did know, and actively suppressed the information from elected civilian officials, what kind of secrecy operates at a level above the governor of an American state? Either answer leads to the same place. Something happened over Arizona that night that no one in a position of official authority has ever fully explained. In the years following the Phoenix Lights, researchers and investigators accumulated a body of evidence that has never been satisfactorily addressed by the official explanation. The testimonies of more than 10,000 witnesses, spread across 300 miles, describing the same object with the same characteristics. The documented presence of the object over Prescott, a city served by its own airport, where multiple experienced pilots and aviation personnel reported the sighting. The physical timing inconsistency between the triangular craft sighting and the 10 o'clock lights, which the official military explanation conflates into a single event they were not. The geometrical impossibility of military flares at the Goldwater Range appearing as large and bright as the filmed footage shows. The testimony of Bill Grainer and others who reported military aircraft scrambling near Luke Air Force Base. The governor of Arizona's personal admission that he saw the object himself and found it inexplicable. None of this has ever been answered. The official position of the United States government has not changed since 1997. Military flares. Training exercise. Nothing to see. In 2008, the city of Phoenix held an event marking the 11th anniversary of the Phoenix Lights. Former Governor Symington spoke at the event. He stood before an audience and described what he had seen. He called for a renewed investigation. He called for transparency. Nothing came of it. In 2014, the British House of Lords member and former government minister Lord Peter Hill-Norton, who had spent years advocating for government disclosure on unidentified aerial phenomena, cited the Phoenix Lights as one of the cases that most demanded official explanation. He argued that in a democracy, when more than 10,000 citizens report seeing something in the sky that the government cannot explain, the government has an obligation to keep trying until it can. Or to admit that it cannot. The United States government has done neither. There is a detail from the night of March 13, 1997, that is rarely mentioned in mainstream accounts. The object that traveled from Nevada through Arizona was not only seen by people on the ground. It was tracked. At least partially. The FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, received reports from pilots in the air that night who encountered or observed the formation. The FAA's standard procedure in such cases is to contact the Air Defense Identification Zone Authority and report any unidentified traffic. Records from that night show that communications occurred between FAA facilities and military radar stations regarding the anomalous formation. What those communications contained has never been fully released. FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests, filed by researchers in the years following the event, produced documents that were either heavily redacted or accompanied by declarations that relevant records could not be located. A formation of lights seen by more than 10,000 people, reported by commercial pilots in the air, tracked partially by federal aviation infrastructure, and the relevant communications have never been made available to the public. Let us also talk about what did not happen that night. When an unidentified aircraft enters controlled airspace around a major American city, the standard military response is rapid and aggressive. Fighter jets are scrambled. The object is intercepted. Its identity is established. This happens within minutes. It is not optional. It is protocol. On the night of March 13, 1997, an unidentified object of massive size traveled slowly over the Phoenix metropolitan area, home at the time to more than 2 million people, within the controlled airspace of one of the busiest aviation corridors in the American Southwest. Luke Air Force Base, one of the largest Air Force installations in the country, is located on the western edge of Phoenix. No official scramble was acknowledged. No interception was reported. No identification was made. The United States Air Force's official position is that nothing unusual occurred that night. But if nothing unusual occurred, why were there no fighter jets? The absence of a military response to an unidentified object of that size, at that altitude, over that city, is itself an anomaly that has never been explained. Either the military did not respond because they determined there was no threat, which means they identified the object. Or they did not respond because they could not. Both conclusions raise questions that the Air Force has never answered. March 13, 1997, was not an isolated incident in Arizona. In the years before and after that night, reports of anomalous lights and objects over the Arizona desert were frequent enough that a pattern emerged. The lights described by Dr. Lynn Kitei, which she had been documenting since early 1995, match in color, behavior, and formation the lights seen on March 13. Reports from residents of the Gila River Indian community, whose land sits directly south of Phoenix in the area where the 10 o'clock lights appeared, described similar phenomena on multiple occasions before and after the 1997 event. The Barry M. Goldwater Range, the area the Air Force claims to use for flare training, is one of the most restricted and least publicly monitored areas of airspace in the continental United States. What happens inside that range is largely invisible to civilian observation. The proximity of that range to the area where anomalous lights have been repeatedly reported by civilians is a geographic fact that invites questions. Is the Goldwater Range being used for something other than conventional weapons testing? Are the lights seen over the Arizona desert the result of classified human technology being tested in secret? Or are they something else entirely? The government has never provided answers specific enough to close those questions. Let us step back for a moment and consider the full scope of what we are dealing with. On one night, in one state, more than 10,000 people reported seeing something they could not explain. Among them, former military officers, commercial pilots, police officers, physicians, and the governor of the state himself. The object traveled 300 miles over 2 hours in complete silence. The government's explanation addressed only part of what was reported and contained geometrical and chronological inconsistencies. The governor of the affected state admitted a decade later that he had seen the object personally and that it was unlike anything he could explain. Communications between federal aviation authorities and military radar regarding the event have never been released. No military intercept was officially acknowledged for an object of extraordinary size traveling over a city of 2 million people. This is not a case of a single witness on a dark road. This is not an ambiguous blob on a grainy video. This is documented. Witnessed by thousands. Filmed from multiple angles. Reported by professionals with training in exactly this kind of observation. And it has never been explained. In 2021, the United States government released its report on unidentified aerial phenomena, the official term replacing the previously used UFO designation. The report acknowledged 143 incidents reported by military personnel that the government could not explain. 143. The Phoenix Lights was not among the cases reviewed, because it occurred before the period covered by the report and because it was a civilian mass sighting rather than a military encounter. But the acknowledgement, by the United States government, that unexplained aerial phenomena are real, are being observed by military personnel with high-quality sensors, and cannot be explained by existing knowledge, changes the context in which the Phoenix Lights must be understood. The question is no longer whether unexplained aerial phenomena exist. The government has confirmed they do. The question is what was observed over Arizona on March 13, 1997. And whether the same question asked by 10,000 witnesses that night has ever received an honest answer from the people with the resources to find it. What do we know for certain? We know that on the night of March 13, 1997, a large formation of lights was observed moving from Nevada through Arizona over a period of more than 2 hours. We know that the witnesses number in the thousands and include individuals with professional training in aviation and observation. We know that a second, distinct event occurred at approximately 10 o'clock in the evening over the Estrella Mountains southwest of Phoenix. We know that the United States Air Force offered an explanation for the second event that contained significant inconsistencies with the physical evidence and witness testimony. We know that the first event was never officially addressed. We know that Governor Fife Symington mocked the witnesses publicly and admitted a decade later that he had been one of them. We know that relevant communications from federal aviation and military authorities regarding the event have never been released. We know that no official military intercept was acknowledged for an object seen over a city of 2 million people. What we do not know is what the object was. What we do not know is who or what operated it. What we do not know is what the United States military saw on their radar screens that night. What we do not know is what Governor Symington was told when he contacted federal authorities seeking answers. And what we do not know is why, almost 30 years later, those answers have never been given to the people who were there. The people who stood in their yards, or leaned out their car windows, or stopped on hiking trails, and looked up at something passing silently overhead in the dark Arizona sky. Something vast. Something deliberate. Something that moved through the night without hurrying. As if it had been here before. As if it knew it would not be stopped. There is a road on the western edge of Phoenix called Dysart Road. On the night of March 13, 1997, a family was driving south on Dysart Road when the craft appeared above them. The father stopped the car. His wife and 2 children got out. They stood in the road and looked up. And above them, blocking out the stars from one horizon to the other, something moved. No sound. No engine roar. No turbulence. No lights blinking in the rhythm of any aircraft they had ever seen. Just lights. Fixed. Steady. Moving as one. The father later said he had no words for it. That no frame of reference he had ever built from 40 years of living on this earth prepared him for what he saw that night. That when it passed, and the stars returned to the sky behind it, he stood in the road for a long time. Not afraid. Not excited. Just, quiet. Because some things, when they happen, take the words away. 30 years have passed since that night. The government has not changed its explanation. The witnesses have not changed their accounts. The footage still exists. The testimony of a governor who mocked 10,000 people and then admitted he was one of them, still exists. And the sky over Arizona is still there. Clear. Open. Dark. Waiting for the next night when something decides to cross it again. Without asking permission. Without making a sound. Without leaving an explanation that anyone has ever found satisfactory. The cold signal does not always announce itself. Sometimes it passes slowly overhead. In silence. And vanishes before anyone in power decides to acknowledge it was ever there.